Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 432 for the 29th of January 2017. Wow, January's almost gone already. It was just the other week, or maybe it was 4 weeks ago that we welcomed in 2017. And this year certainly has not been disappointing when it comes to bizarre events and strange goings-on. We'll get to that in a minute. It was very sad to see the death of actor Sir John Hurt just yesterday. And, of course, he was a marvellously multi-talented actor, famous in pop culture for playing character in the original Alien movie, playing one of the doctors, the War Doctor in the Doctor Who series, many other fantastic roles. And it just goes to show that not all the top famous people died in 2016. But what's coming up on this week's episode of The Skeptic Zone? We're going to have a report from Heidi Robertson and Alison Gaylard from the Northern Rivers Vaccination supporters. Now, not too long ago, a local newspaper in their area, right up at the top of this state of New South Wales, the Tweed Daily News, the Tweed that's named after the Tweed River, the river that runs, I think it runs between New South Wales and Queensland, or just near the border, somewhere there. The Tweed Daily News ran a story which was extraordinary when you think about it from the point of view of it showing just simply one side of the vaccination question, which was not really a question. Anyway, it gave air to extremists and nutters, one of them wearing a chemtrail T-shirt, as will be explained soon, as Alison and Heidi bring you this story. They bring you the original story as printed in the Tweed Daily News, and get a feeling for how bad that was, and their response in the form of an open letter. And it's so good to see that the Northern Rivers Vaccination supporters are continuing their activism, their work up there in that area of New South Wales, which, of course, via their efforts, goes globally. I mean, you're hearing about it right now. And I admire those people very much. A young group. They've only been active for a handful of years, but boy, are they making a difference. Coming up at the top of the show, find out about their open letter to the Tweed Daily News. Following that, we have a story published at skeptics.com.au about criticism levelled at a research paper which seemed to indicate that acupuncture for babies with colic, was a good and beneficial thing. Was it? Was it? Indeed, was it? Find out soon when we cover that story. Then it's Brew Ha Ha from Australia's Science TV, Australia's Science Channel, with Tania Meyer this week. This week, Tania's going to be looking at problems with cell phone batteries and pedal power, or pedal power with a little bit of assistance. That's Brew Ha Ha coming up a little later on. Then we have news of a talk down in Victoria for the Morty skeptics, a talk about one of my favourite topics, UFOs. That should be interesting, with Steve Roberts. And if you're living in Victoria, if you're living in Melbourne, around the Morty-Alec area especially, that will be a great night out for you. And speaking of UFOs, following that, it's Maynard's Spooky Action, where Maynard will tell us about one of his favourite podcasts, the UFO podcast. Or podcast UFO, or something like that. A bit spooky, a bit mysterious. Why does he listen to it? And there's a question. A question will be posed for you. Then to round off the show, more homeopathy. See, more homeopathy equals less power. Less homeopathy is more powerful than more homeopathy. We have a story about homeopathy written by Professor Edzard Ernst, and it's a good one for skeptics, as Edzard Ernst writes about some of the common mistakes skeptics make when talking about homeopathy. Some things to be aware of, some things to look out for, so you are better prepared when debating, talking about homeopathy. All that coming up on today's episode of The Skeptic Zone. Now, there are many more stories. This past week has proven to be what's the word I'm looking for? Dramatic, I suppose you would say, when it comes to politics, which we normally don't cover on the Skeptic Zone. But this one is a blockbuster, folks. What the Trump administration are doing in a huge hurry, it appears to me, is certainly breathtaking. And I note, and I'm sure this is a story we're going to be bringing to you before long, that scientists are now looking at forming their own march against some of the policies of the new Trump administration. As we speak, there are protests at JFK Airport, as I record this, I should say. And there's just been so much news coming out of Washington that it's very hard to keep up or collate or get to grips with. Now, if you're like me, and when you're using Facebook, a lot of your feed will be consumed by what Trump is doing now and what laws are trying to be passed and all the rest of it. All we can do is try to keep up and report to you the relevant issues when it comes to science and skepticism, or maybe a bit wider in this case, because in all my years, which are many, and all the presidents I've seen come and go, this one so far really takes the cake and the icing and everything else. And there is more news coming from overseas with the movie Vax that we will get to probably in the next episode of the Skeptic Zone. We hope to bring you some news of the Aquapole device, a situation that I personally have been looking at for some months now, and we hope to hear some good news about that soon, or at least some news we can report about the Aquapole. This is the device that you whack onto the ceiling. It sort of hangs down like a big ceiling light. It's a big sphere with what can be best described as a piece of modern art stuck inside, and the claim is that this modern art will channel energies from the universe, direct these energies into your walls, and fix your rising damp problem. Has no moving parts and requires no power. I think that sums it up. Anyway, hopefully we can bring you something about that soon at least. And there's a story about the movie Vaxxed, which has just been denied screening in the UK. I think this is all very hot off the wire sort of news. So hopefully we can bring you more about that too in the coming weeks. But now it's time for me to run downstairs and have some cake, because I think President Trump took the cake, or takes the cake. I better have some cake before he takes it all. Well, I'm doing that. I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
It's the Raw Skeptic Report with Heidi Robertson.
Hello everyone, Heidi Robertson from the Northern Rivers Vaccination supporters. It's great to be back for the Skeptic Zone and in your ears for 2017. On the 25th of January 2017, a local newspaper, the Tweed Daily News, operating out of Tweed Heads, northern New South Wales, published an article that was both surprising and supremely disappointing for the members of our group. We've worked hard with the media over the past 4 years to try to ensure that stories about vaccination don't contain false balance. That is, when the journalist equates the expertise of vaccine researchers, immunologists and doctors with the feel opinions of anti-vaccination activists. We have had great success in this region with the media, and they have not approached the more well-known vaccine deniers for their input for quite a while now. When they have, we have refused to take part in the interview, explaining our stance that we do not debate the science of vaccination and that we do not wish to give vaccine deniers legitimacy by appearing alongside them in print, on TV or on radio. Stop the AVN actually presented a poster at an immunisation conference a couple of years ago showing data that reflects the success of this tactic. Imagine our dismay then to see the following article in print. along with a colour image of a vaccine denier with a chemtrail conspiracy theorist. They are pictured adorned with merchandise from Wakefield's anti-vaccination film Vaxxed, and holding up a Vaxxed poster with the title, "The Film They Don't Want You to See." The caption to the photo reads, "Tough message. Anti-vaccination activists Robert Deutsch and Donna Kosica are in Murwillumbah spreading the word about the dangers of vaccinations." So here is the transcript of the article, titled Anti-Vaccine Movement, with the subheading Tragedy Prompts Campaign, by Mitchell Crawley. Activists have taken to Murwillumbah's streets to campaign for transparency from governments and medical professionals and to demand people get a choice on vaccinations. Donna Kosica, who describes herself as a pro-life freedom fighter, chose to campaign after losing her husband in 2015. She believes his death was as a result of vaccines. "My husband died of cancer," Ms. Kosica said. "That's what woke me up. I was looking for alternate help in Australia and struggled to find anything. I've always been following the vaccine issue, but that just opened up my eyes. It was related because my husband Milosh would have had polio," I think she means the polio vaccine, "back in the 50s, and SV40, if you look on the Centres for Disease Control and Prevention website, you'll find it buried in there that they think the SV40 causes cancer. He passed away in July 2015, diagnosed on March the 9th, the day after his birthday, which was just horrific." Ms. Kosica says she wants informed consent and the government to tell us what's in a vaccine. Another campaigner, Robert Deutsch, who is in Australia giving a series of talks on matters including chemical trails, claimed people weren't aware of the health repercussions of vaccines. "In all fairness, the doctors should be fully informing people of any side effects in advance of them getting vaccinations, and there should be an actual law that says people have to sign a consent that they were given this information," he said. "Without them being given it, it's not fair to any of us." The federal government last year deemed parents who refused to immunise their children receive no allowances. These included childcare benefits, childcare rebates and family tax benefits. Northern New South Wales Health was contacted for comment and directed readers to www.immunise.health.gov.au. And that's the article. There is a little side box which says Vaccination. A national program funds vaccines preventing flus, measles, meningococcal, mumps, whooping cough, German measles, chickenpox, polio and lockjaw. And the second point in that box says the approval process for a vaccine can take up to 10 years. We decided that an open letter to the editor was in order, which we sent via email, posted on our Facebook page and posted on the Tweed Daily News Facebook page. Their Facebook page got a number of other comments from readers disappointed with the article. Fellow administrator of our group NRVS, Alison Gaylard, will now read out our open letter.
The Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters, NRVS, would like to express our concern and deep dismay regarding Mitchell Crawley's article, Anti-Vaccine Movement, published on Wednesday the 25th of January 2017 on page 7 of the Tweed Daily News. NRVS was formed in 2012 when a group of concerned community members realised how low the vaccination rates are in the Northern Rivers region. There is much misinformation in this region regarding vaccines, and our mission is to correct this misinformation where we see it and put out factual information regarding the efficacy and safety of vaccination. Our small community group has since grown substantially, and we were recently endorsed by the World Health Organization as a reputable source of information on vaccine safety and now appear on their website. We were very disappointed to see this article alongside a photo of two vaccine-denying activists. The photo alone is showing them promoting merchandise in relation to a film that maliciously spreads lies and misinformation and contains information easily demonstrated to be blatantly deceptive. The film, Vaxxed, is backed and promoted by discredited Dr. Andrew Wakefield, stripped of his medical licence by the UK's British Medical Council when it was revealed he performed unethical and unnecessary procedures on children and fraudulently misrepresented findings from a study he was involved in, for which he stood to benefit financially. It is frankly astounding that any journalist writing about vaccination would not be aware of Wakefield's history. The article's subheading, Tragedy Prompts Campaign, is very misleading to the general public, implying a correlation when there isn't one. It is well known that vaccines do not cause cancer, and the SV40 factor has never been shown to have a causative link to cancer. In fact, there are now vaccines, Hep B and HPV, that protect against certain cancers. Was the contrary information from Ms. Kosika taken as a given by the journalist and editor of the Tweed Daily News? Informed consent is mentioned. Informed consent is very important, but only when the information is gleaned from credible sources. Unfortunately, anti-vaccination proponents do not gather their information from credible sources. Often their misinformation is obtained from anecdotes, hearsay, and sometimes conspiracy-fuelled social media sites. Governments and doctors do, in fact, advise what is in vaccines. It is very easy to search this information from credible websites or your GP. It is interesting to note that often when trying to discredit vaccines, vaccine deniers will use the manufacturer's inserts, the very same documents they claim are being hidden by the authorities. Vaccines are stringently tested for years and undergo various trials before being used in the community. On average, it will take 10 to 15 years for a vaccine to be approved for public use. Parents do already have to sign a form when their child is being vaccinated to show that they have received the information relevant to the vaccines being administered at the time. They do not need to sign the form until they are satisfied with the information given. Robert Deutsch is a well-known conspiracy proponent who believes that condensation trails from planes are actually chemtrails and that the population is being poisoned from the air. It is concerning to think that worried parents may take advice from a conspiracy theorist and an anti-vaccination activist as a result of this irresponsible article. We would like to pose the question of whether the journalist and editor followed the journalistic code of conduct or the principles of the Australian Press Council in fact-checking any of the information published in the article. NRVS has been involved in the past with your newspaper regarding vaccination. The issue of false balance has been discussed at length with your journalists. This makes it all the more disappointing that you have published such a fear-mongering article. If your readers would like credible information on vaccination, we would refer them to our website. A parting thought. Would you interview a cosmologist regarding the complexities of the solar system and the known universe, and then refer to Roger, who believes the Earth is flat, for an alternative view? Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters.
A reply to my post on the Tweed Daily News Facebook page got a response from the editor after receiving no response via email. The response read, "Thanks for your letter, Heidi. We will publish it in our next edition tomorrow, although it may be edited for length purposes. Could you send us the best contact numbers for your organisation? It may be worth doing a follow-up story, giving your side and outlining your fight in the region against such anti-vaccination movement. The reason we covered this story was because I thought it was interesting they were targeting our area, although perhaps this was not relayed in the article as well as it may have been. Personally, I am a very strong supporter of vaccination, having grown up in Africa where people fight for it, as highlighted in a recent article on your website. Please contact me at," and then the editor gives her email address. At the time of recording, I have not been able to find out if our letter was in fact published. We will be in touch with the editor about a follow-up story and we'll let you know if anything comes of it. Till next time, this has been Heidi Robertson from NRVS. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and our website www.nrvs.info. Bye for now.
Hello, Richard and all the listeners of Skeptic Zone. My name is Ran Levy, and I'm the producer and co-host of Curious Mind. It's a podcast about science, technology, and history at www.cmpod.net. Each episode will bring you interesting stories from a wide range of subjects, from physics to astronomy and medicine, from arts to science fiction. We strive for the highest production values both in content and in delivery. We already have on the air episodes about German U-boats in the Second World War, about the history of X-rays and the war of currents between Tesla and Edison. Come and have a listen. www.cmpod.net.
Wide condemnation of pro-acupuncture research paper on infant colic. Published at www.skeptics.com.au by Tim Mendham on the 22nd of January 2017. A controversial study that claims to have found proof that acupuncture is effective in treating colic in infants has been widely rebuked. In fact, even the associate editor of the journal where the study was published said, quote, "In technical terms, the study is negative. ... The primary outcome did not turn out to be statistically significant." End quote. The paper was authored by two academics from Lund University in Sweden and involved blind testing of 147 infants over a 2-week period. The infants were divided into 3 groups: variously treated with traditional acupuncture, up to 5 needle points, minimal acupuncture, 1 needle point, and no acupuncture. The authors claimed evidence that those infants treated with either form of acupuncture performed better in alleviating colic, fussing and crying than those in the non-acupuncture group. The paper appeared in the Acupuncture in Medicine journal, itself published by the British Medical Journal. The BMJ's involvement with the AIM has been an aspect of debate that has also raised the eyebrows, if not the ire, of many commentators. Much criticism has been laid against the small sample size for the research. Michael Cummings, the AIM associate editor mentioned above, agreed it was small but put that down to a lack of funding. But most criticism by qualified commentators is in reference to the interpretation of the data and statistical significance, if any, of the results. While Cummings' comment about the results being, quote, "not statistically significant," end quote, may have been given begrudgingly, others have been much more overt and harsher. Professor Edzard Ernst, Emeritus Professor of Complementary Medicine at the University of Exeter, and noted campaigner against poor evidence in alternative medicine, said that the study, quote, "confirms previous research showing that acupuncture is a theatrical placebo. The study was designed without an adequate placebo group. Therefore, conclusions about specific therapeutic effects of acupuncture are not permissible." Quote, "We know that colicky babies respond even to minimal attention, and this trial confirms that a little additional TLC will generate an effect. The observed outcome is therefore not necessarily related to acupuncture." End quote. Professor David Colquhoun, Emeritus Professor of Pharmacology, University College London, was even blunter, describing it as, quote, "one of the worst papers on acupuncture that I've come across." Colquhoun, who told Australian skeptics that, quote, "I've been dealing with little else but this ever since it came out," end quote. said in a UK Science Media Centre roundup that, quote, "The statistical analysis in the papers is incomplete. This should have been detected by the referees, but it wasn't. For a start, the opening statement, a two-sided p-value, lesser than or equal to 0.05, was considered statistically significant, is simply unacceptable in the light of all the recent work about reproducibility," end quote. More details of Colquhoun's views on the statistics procedure involved in the research can be found in the roundup. The paper received much publicity with hundreds of media outlets covering the research, often basing their reports on a press release issued by the BMJ. Calling the release, quote, hyperbole, end quote, and, quote, shockingly misleading, end quote, Colquhoun said in his blog DC's Improbable Science that, quote, the BMJ group should not be mixing up press releases about real medicine with press releases about quackery. There seems to be something about quackery that's clickbait for the mainstream media, end quote. Nonetheless, many media outlets also included comments from Colquhoun and others decrying what they said were sloppy statistical analysis and overreaching conclusions. The one person quoted in the Science Media Centre roundup with a positive response was Professor George Lewis, Professor of Health Research at the University of Southampton, who said, quote, "This looks to me to be a good-sized, fastidious, well-conducted study. Cochrane A for an acupuncture trial in which the therapist cannot be blinded. The outcome is clear and the power of the study seems reasonable, which suggests that medical acupuncture is a reasonable and, as far as we know, safe intervention for infant colic," end quote. However, Colquhoun described Lewis as, quote, "the well-known apologist for all things quackish," end quote, adding that Lewis showed what he called, quote, "an ignorance of statistics that would shame an undergraduate," end quote. Colquhoun summed up, quote, "The design of the trial is reasonable, apart from the control group, but the statistical analysis is appalling. It's very likely that there aren't any real effects of acupuncture at all. This paper serves more to muddy the waters than to add useful information. It's a model for the sort of mistakes that have led to the crisis in reproducibility. The BMJ should not be publishing this sort of stuff, and the referees seem to have no understanding of statistics," end quote. And that was Wide Condemnation of Pro-Acupuncture Research Paper on Infant Colic, written by Tim Mendham, published on the 22nd of January 2017 at www.skeptics.com.au. And now, direct from the cafe at Australia's Science Channel, it's Brew Ha Ha with Tania Meyer.
You all know about the trouble Samsung is having at the moment. No doubt the cost of the company is going to be huge in terms of dollars. I mean, those fireproof boxes can't be cheap. But the dollars cost is nothing compared to the environmental costs. Smartphones aren't really recycled. Not like our old school phones are. We haven't really worked out how to do it and make use of the bits we end up with. About 50 rare earth minerals and metals end up in your phone. They're mined from around the world, transported to factories, put into phones and shipped back around the world. Now, Samsung's phones are being shipped around the world again, only to have about 12 of those metals recycled. The rest will be thrown away, including all the rare stuff that the Earth is fast running out of. If Samsung hadn't glued in the battery, they might have been able to recycle a few more, but I guess if they hadn't glued in the battery, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Yes, Samsung will be taking a big loss on the Galaxy 7, but the environment will be taking an even bigger one. This week, cycling fanatics are going crazy for the Tour Down Under. But if you're anything like me, you're probably just wondering why the hell people put their bodies through such torture. But what if you had some help? What if you did what we've all really wanted to do and you put a tiny electric motor in your bike? Maybe it sounds unrealistic, but the rule makers of cycling are actually worried about cheats doing it. Just now, French politicians have tried to make it a criminal offence in pro sport. But every time there's a crackdown on one type of cheating, another one turns up. And hey, while we don't condone it, it's pretty interesting to see what the cheats are going to come up with next. Just think what they could do if they put their creativity to honest use. And you know what? For mere mortals like me, a tiny motor in my bike is a great idea. It's not going to make me the world champion, but trust me, I need all the help I can get.
For more Brew Ha Ha and Australian science, head for www.australiascience.tv. Now, here's news of a meet-up in Victoria. The Mordialic Skeptics in the Pub, known as Mordy Skeptics in the Pub, have a meeting on Tuesday, the 7th of February, starting at 7:30pm, UFO Belief and Religion, by the one and only Dr. Steve Roberts, an old friend of the Skeptic Zone. Dr. Steve Roberts, a UFO expert, but how can anybody be an expert in something that is unknown? Will attempt to describe a UFO believer's mindset, drawing parallels with how religions develop. Steve's cheerful talk, I'm reading this off the website, folks, Steve's cheerful talk will feature numerous jokes, I hope so, what's a UFO joke, and relevant quotations from Monty Python's Life of Brian. This does sound like a good talk. All are welcome, except the Popular Front of Judea. Yes, very funny. Steve Roberts is a long-standing member of Australian Skeptics, and he is the author of Dr. Bob's Trivia Quiz, the answers to which you will not find in any encyclopedia. Steve has a PhD in chemistry, but now works as a consultant encryptologist for major banks. He even worked as an intelligence analyst during the Cold War. Steve, don't retire just yet. Anyway, UFOs, Belief and Religion by Dr. Steve Roberts. It sounds like a really great talk. For more information, just Google Mordialic Skeptics in the Pub, or M-O-R-D-I, Mordy Skeptics in the Pub, or simply click the link in this week's show notes. So that's Tuesday, the 7th of February, at 7:30pm, Mordialic Sporting Club in Victoria.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Ooh, Maynard's spooky action at a distance. Named after, the thing that swaps over one side to the other. I don't know, look it up at home. And speaking of looking it up, look up Richard Saunders.
Hello, Maynard. I love to come here to visit the Maynard International Studios Annex.
Yes, we're just watching two shows at the moment. On the TV, we've been watching What on Earth, which is a show about satellite photos that people speculate about. And we're watching now You Have Been Warned, which has a whole bunch of people doing wacky stuff on video shows that they do, sometimes hurting themselves. But it has scientists explaining the parabola, like if you go to jump a bike over a roof, how far you've got to come from to do it.
And you know what? I only come over here, Maynard, to watch your cable TV from time to time to watch these crazy shows, but it's a lot of fun.
Yes. We're actually watching someone boiling coffee in sand at the moment, and that's all got something to do with inductive heating or something.
It's very educational.
Look, I'll tell you what's educational too. As you know, I listen to the true sound of the universe. I like a lot of alternative podcasts, and I think you would describe them as having alternative facts, Richard.
You've got that right, Maynard. No, actually, I do enjoy your segments every now and then on the Skeptic Zone. Where is
every now and then?
Every now and then.
Yeah.
What's Maynard listening to? And here's another one.
Look, here's one that came out this week. One of the podcasts I like listening to is called Podcast UFO. Now, the host is Martin Willis, and they also have giving weekly updates. And this is worth listening to, whether you are a fan of ufology or not. That's Alejandro Rojas. He gives weekly updates, and he just mentions all the latest sightings that have been around. And he's not saying that these things are definitely craft from outer space. He's just telling you where the lights are in the sky. There was a recent UFO flap down Chile way. There was an infrared photo that they released that the Chilean government couldn't work out what it was, I think, and it turned out to be one of those very large airliners flying away from the camera, and so it was worked out that that's turned out what it was. So that's why they couldn't work out the distance and size of this object, because it was very big and it was away from the camera.
And how did you discover this one? And what a great name, I must say, for a website and a podcast, Podcast UFO.
Yep, podcastufo.com is where it's at, and they talk to all sorts of. Well, look, because I just look around. I look at ufology, all that sort of thing, and that's what I'm doing late at night. People, you might think I'm doing other stuff, but that's what I'm doing late at night. But the latest guest they had, I believe it was show 237, I think it was. They had Nick Redfern. Now, Nick Redfern used to work for the Ministry of Defence in the UK, looking after the Department of Strange Sightings and things like that. Yeah, he would sort of note them. I don't think he had any power to do much investigation, but he'd certainly note them and see what was going on. And he was a guest on the show, and towards the end of that show, on that podcast 237, they asked him what would be the definitive evidence that would convince skeptics that UFOs are a real phenomena of some sort and not just some sort of thing that people are imagining. And this is what he said. And I think you want to phrase this as a question to the audience.
I do. Now, we're about to play a clip from this show, the podcast UFO, and have a listen to this clip, have a listen to the arguments, and we would like your response. Now, do you think there are some logical fallacies going on here? If so, which ones are they, and can you sort of explain those? When you come up with your answers, go to our Facebook page, the Facebook page of the Skeptic Zone, link at skepticzone.tv, and in the comment sections for this week's episode, give us your thoughts.
Yeah. Let's have a listen as Martin Willis asks guest Nick Redfern on episode 237 of Podcast UFO and see what you think.
Yes. When I've talked to skeptics, I've had a few on the show in the past, and I've asked them a question: what type of proof would you actually need? And the answers I get are always the same. Physical evidence, something they can research and hold in their hands, type of thing. I remember Seth Shostak from SETI said he would need a wing in the Smithsonian with UFO parts in it before he'd believe in it. So,
well, I understand sort of the need for evidence, but sometimes the body of data is, if not proof, it's definitely sort of persuasive. I mean, there are examples where people have been found guilty of murder when there's no body. Billions of people, not millions, billions of people, believe in a God, and I'm sort of open-minded on the whole phenomenon of that as to what, the situation really is. But, and I don't mean this with disrespect, I mean it just as a fact. Billions of people believe in the existence of a God on belief alone. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't have a problem with people who have faith or anything like that at all. But, I think you can't criticize ufology for believing the accounts and believing the statistics when somebody else believes, that when they die, some part of the body continues. So I think in that sense, if we're going to be criticised for believing in things, then that should apply across the board, or it shouldn't apply at all. I think with the flying triangles, do we have a flying triangle in hand? No, we don't. Can we make a persuasive case that allows us to believe these things are real? Yes, we can, because of, we have a few photographs and we have highly credible testimony from military personnel. So in that sense, belief, becomes sort of a blurry line, really.
Well, see, for me, that's an argument to me that obscures it a bit, because I would actually say that if people are experiencing or witnessing something, there is a phenomenon going on, even if it isn't purely physical.
Well, I don't want to say too much, because I've made up, when I listened to it, I was, in fact, mentioning to you off microphone, this logical fallacy and this chain of arguments. But we are interested in what you think. Dear listeners, what you think.
Yeah, well, you suggested a Latin phrase. I think it was caveat emptor or something like that. And I thought, well, it's got nothing to do with shopping at Aldi. But I digress.
Yes.
Okay. So people can go where and do what?
All right. If you go to Facebook and just look up the Skeptic Zone and go to our Facebook page, or go to skepticzone.tv, there is a link there to the Facebook page, and every week, in fact, you can, if you so wish, you can put your comments up there.
Okay. But until then, there we go.
Hey, Richard.
Oh, hi, Trish. Hi. Would you like a coffee?
Yeah, thanks. What are you working on?
I'm trying to come up with a new promo to play on the Skeptic Zone.
Who's it for?
The Good Thinking Society in the UK. Michael Marshall, Simon Singh, Laura Thomas and that crowd.
Oh, yeah, I know them. Oh. They've been doing some great work investigating veterinary homeopathy.
Veterinary homeopathy? What, sugar pills for cows?
I know, right? And also they're looking at some of the dodgy medical advice given by UK chiropractors.
Really? Okay, look, I'll mention all that in the promo. Now, their website is goodthinkingsociety.org.
And they've recently been reporting on the resurgence of faith healer Peter Popoff.
Peter Popoff. Great. Okay, look, thanks for that. It gives me something good to think about. From the blog of Professor Edzard Ernst at edzardernst.com. Published on the 10th of December 2016, when skeptics criticise homeopathy, they are often wrong. Yes, this post might come as a surprise to some, and no, I am not changing sides in the debate about homeopathy. But I have long felt that when skeptics criticise homeopathy, they often wrong-foot themselves by using arguments which are not entirely correct. Here, I want to list 7 of them. Homeopathy is one single, well-defined entity. During the last 200 years, many different variations of Hahnemann's classical homeopathy have emerged. For instance, clinical homeopathy, complex homeopathy, and isoopathy. Strictly speaking, they should be differentiated, and it would not be correct to generalize across all of them. In the 200 years history of homeopathy, homeopaths have done no good at all. Hahnemann and his followers can be credited with considerable achievements. Foremost, they realized that, 200 years ago, most of the conventional treatments in common use were not just useless, but often outright dangerous. Their criticism of, quote, heroic medicine, end quote, helped to initiate crucial reforms and to improve health care for the benefit of millions. No theories to explain how homeopathy might work have ever been put forward. There are several theories which might go some way in explaining how homeopathy works, but all of them are currently just theories, and none provides a full explanation as to the mechanism of action of highly diluted remedies. Yet to claim that homeopathy is totally implausible might be a counterproductive exaggeration. There is nothing in it. Many skeptics claim that homeopathic remedies are devoid of active ingredients. Yet, not all homeopathic remedies are highly diluted. Some can contain pharmacologically active compounds for affecting human health. These preparations, therefore, cannot be classified as implausible. There is no credible evidence at all that might support homeopathy. Several well-conducted clinical studies of homeopathy with positive results have been published. It is therefore not true to claim that there is no good trial evidence at all to support homeopathy. The much better point skeptics should make is that the totality of the reliable evidence fails to show that highly dilute homeopathic remedies are more effective than placebos. Homeopaths aim at deceiving their patients because they have nothing to offer them. It would be wrong to claim that all homeopaths aim at deceiving their patients, and it would be misleading to say that homeopaths have nothing to offer to their patients. Many patients of homeopaths primarily treasure the long, compassionate consultations that homeopaths have with their patients and see the homeopathic remedy as secondary. Seen from this perspective, homeopaths do offer something that many patients value highly. Patients who use homeopathy must be stupid. It would be arrogant, insulting, and counterproductive to claim that everyone who uses homeopathy is stupid. Patients consult homeopaths mostly because they have needs which are not being met by conventional medicine, but which they feel taken care of by homeopathy. Seen from this perspective, the current popularity of homeopathy in some countries is a poignant criticism of conventional medicine. To dismiss it as stupidity means missing a chance to learn an important lesson and to improve mainstream healthcare. I know my stance here can easily get misunderstood, but please don't get me wrong. I am not saying that homeopathy is a useful therapy, nor am I suggesting that we should not criticize it or stop public funding for it. All that I am trying to convey here is, when we criticize homeopathy, we ought to make sure our arguments are factually correct. If not, we only give ammunition to our opponents. In a nutshell, I don't wish to undermine our arguments, but I want them to be more effective. And that was When Skeptics Criticize Homeopathy, They Are Often Wrong, written by Edzard Ernst, published on the 10th of December at edzardernst.com, with a link in this week's show notes. Quackwatch, your guide to quackery, health fraud, and intelligent decisions, operated by Stephen Barrett, MD. Quackwatch is now an international network of people who are concerned about health-related frauds, myths, fads, fallacies, and misconduct. Its primary focus is on quackery-related information that is difficult or impossible to get elsewhere. Articles on quackery include quackery. How should it be defined? How it sells. 26 ways to spot it. How it harms cancer patients. 7 warning signs for bogus science. Why health professionals become quacks, and many more, including in-depth looks at acupuncture, chiropractic, homeopathy, naturopathy, and much more. Visit www.quackwatch.com. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. What's that expression, that famous old cliche, may you live in interesting times? Well, we are living in interesting times. I wonder what this next week will bring us, news-wise, from the United States. It's hard to keep up with. It really is. It's staggering. As I mentioned at the top of the show, there may well be some sort of protest march organized by the scientific community. Now, one of the things that worried me long before we heard about the real action taken by the Trump administration or they're trying, was the fact that Vice President Pence is he seems to be a creationist. So I'm sure my friend Eugenie Scott, who worked for the National Centre for Science Education, is equally concerned about that. I might see if I can have a word to Jeannie about that. Anyway, lots happening in the world when it comes to science and reason these days, folks. We live in an interesting time indeed. Thank you to those people who find the Skeptic Zone interesting and interesting enough to support the show via Patreon or just via micropayments at PayPal, and you can do all that at skepticzone.tv. The microphone I'm speaking into right now was bought by listeners of the Skeptic Zone via those contributions, and I thank you very much. And thank you to those people who also support our reporter Maynard at maynard.com.au or patreon.com/Maynard for his efforts into bringing entertainment and comedy to the world via his podcast with Tim Ferguson, Bunga Bunga, and his other podcasts. So please check that out, and if you enjoy Maynard's work, he is well worth supporting. And if you would like Maynard to do some, possibly some voiceover work for you or something else, DJ work, why not drop him a line? Just visit maynard.com.au and see what he can do for you. Once again, thank you for listening. And for this week, until next week, which will no doubt be a week filled with, shall we say, interesting news, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for contacts, an archive of all episodes since 2008, and our online store. Please support the Skeptic Zone by following us on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, liking us on Facebook, and leaving a review on iTunes. You can also show your support by subscribing via PayPal for as little as 99 cents a week. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics Inc. or any other skeptical organisation.
So here is the transcript.
Yay! Was that right?
Yeah, that's great.
And it's really good to see that the Northern Rivers vaccination supporters... There's a cat at the door. Maud, what do you want? Are you going to come in or out? If you're coming in, come in. Are you going to stay? Are you going to be quiet if I shut the door?